Cool. We can go ahead and get started, I think. So thanks everybody for joining in. We are excited to share a lot more about how Scanner can augment Datadog and improve costs. I think Datadog costs and explosion of costs is a very common problem. So yeah, excited to chat more. If folks have questions along the way, feel free to ping them in the chat. And Alex, our amazing head of ops and on the founding team, will interrupt me periodically to get these questions in and make sure that people get their questions answered. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining in. Just introduce myself. I'm Cliff Crosland. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Scanner. And one of the things that we really believe in is the following. The architecture of traditional log management tools is completely wrong for modern log volumes. And this is leading to really excessive costs. It's leading to vendor lock-in, and there are a lot of problems with the way that log management traditionally works. So at Scanner, we really believe that a new architecture is needed to drive down costs and make it possible to scale up with all of the different log sources that people have. And this is exactly what we're building. So today we're just going to focus on how Scanner can help teams that are using Datadog to really dramatically reduce costs, especially for the security use cases and if they're using Datadog Cloud SIEM. But we'll get into it. So just to set the stage a little bit, the reason why you need to use something like Datadog Cloud SIEM is there is just a massive surface area of tools and cloud services that you need to run when you are operating a company nowadays. So you might have infrastructure in AWS, GCP, and Azure. Each of those has its own set of APIs that has a lot of networking. And in addition to those, there is really sensitive and core infrastructure that is being used across companies for many different use cases like writing code, collaborating together on code. Identity providers are like a SaaS and cloud-based service with tools like Okta, you have Slack for internal communication, 1Password to manage secrets across an org. There's a huge surface area to cover, and tools like Datadog and other SIEMs that are focused on this sort of cloud operational data are really useful for monitoring these services for threats and making it much easier to investigate them. So like log volumes are huge across all of these services, and it's really important to make sure to have threat detection and coverage for all of these different services. So just to give like a little bit of an overview of what you expect to see in Datadog to help with this use case. You have Datadog Cloud SIEM, which gives you useful detection rules. You can see like the top sources include CloudTrail and GCP, and these are SaaS tools and cloud services that generate a lot of log volume, and it's really important to monitor all of these cloud operational logs. And they provide a few hundred out-of-the-box detection rules to detect threat activity and send you alerts when problems arise and when threat activity is detected. And then once you have detected threat activity, you get an alert. The next step is to jump into log search. So Datadog has this useful tool to go and search through all of your event data from all of these different cloud services to find and dig through and rebuild the story of what happened and where the threat came from and whether it is threatening or whether it's a false positive. So these are two very important parts of the solution, the continuous monitoring with detection rules, and then the ability to go and investigate. So here is why this can be a challenge with Datadog. Datadog is great and is a popular tool, but managing Datadog costs is a perennial problem for companies, especially as they start to scale dramatically. I mean, like overnight, your bill can explode. Once your log volume reaches 100 gigabytes per day, which is actually very trivial to get to, and it will quickly blow past that to 200 gigabytes, 500 gigs a day, a terabyte a day, Datadog becomes extremely painful. So we're going to talk about a couple of these different tools and split this apart and talk about what you can do to manage these costs, and then how Scanner can be extremely helpful for specific cases here to make it much easier to get coverage and reduce costs. So just to give a high-level overview of the kinds of things that you need for security log use cases in Datadog, you have Datadog Cloud SIEM. That's really the core feature. It has useful detections, but it's very expensive. You have Datadog standard logs, which is the common indexing and search tool in Datadog. It's really fast, has very limited retention though, and it has pretty high cost. So it's pretty typical to see retention of only like 15 days, et cetera. Then you have Datadog Flex Logs, which is a new tool in Datadog. This is much more cost effective and you can retain logs for a long time, but the queries get slow, and that can be a challenge. And trying to balance where the logs go and how far back and how much to retain can be a challenge. But anyways, the common pain points you see across all of these: cost control, visibility, better log management required, and excited to walk through how Scanner can really augment and is extremely powerful at giving you coverage over massive high volume log sources and dramatically reducing costs and alleviating some of these pain points. So as we get started, let's talk about how Datadog works. You have the security logs from many different sources, from different cloud providers, and from different services like your Okta logs, your GitHub logs, your Slack logs, et cetera. They need to be ingested by Datadog. And so there are a couple of different methods that you can use, but everything goes into Datadog and it gets pushed through the ingestion API and then starts to get fed through Datadog's pipelines, which allows you to parse and transform the logs. Then you run Cloud SIEM detections next, and then after that is indexing. And you can choose in Datadog whether the logs flow to the standard index, which has low retention but is fast, or whether the logs flow to flex logs, which can retain a lot more data and it's much slower, but is very helpful if you need to go do an investigation through history. So this is where it gets interesting. How much does this all cost? If your log volume is low, it's okay. But if it gets higher, and it can get higher quickly, then Datadog becomes very expensive for the security log use case. So the first cost is transferring your logs over the internet. This can be tricky. There's this egress cost. There's a VPC like connectors, et cetera. But yeah, getting the logs over to Datadog can be a challenge. Then you have the Datadog ingestion, which is 10 cents per gigabyte just to flow through the pipelines. And then the Cloud SIEM becomes very expensive, $5 per million events. And we'll dig into that with a concrete example. Then indexing, for retention of only 15 days, it's like $1.70 per million log events. And then for flex logs, it's 60 cents per million log events per month. It's much cheaper, but that also can become quite expensive unless you're careful. So let's look at a concrete use case. So in this example, we have CloudTrail logs flowing in at 250 gigabytes per day. And CloudTrail logs are roughly like each log event is between 1 and 2 kilobytes in size. So if we say 2 kilobytes, then 250 gigs a day is roughly 125 million events. Network transfer over the internet is $750 a month. That's kind of expensive. It's not bad. Datadog ingest to go through the pipelines and transform is another $750 a month. But then where it gets expensive is all of these logs, all of your CloudTrail logs need to flow through SIEM analysis. And that's almost 20 grand a month. Then you will store usually like some retention window of a couple of weeks, maybe 30 days maximum in standard logs. That's not too bad, 3 grand a month. And then flex logs, though, if you want to keep 6 months around so that you can do deeper investigations and like trace down the original threat activity back a couple of months, that is surprisingly expensive too if you're using the flex starter plan. So if you look at the breakdown here on the left, that's over 440 grand a year. Half of that is the SIEM analysis, and the flex logs is a little more than a third. So this starts to get really expensive once you start to have log sources that are a couple hundred gigabytes in size. And this is just CloudTrail. You might have Cloudflare, which might be another 100 or 200 gigabytes. Things can get painful quickly if you're piping everything through Datadog. And so we're going to talk through 2 strategies you can use to reduce your Datadog costs. But before I do, I just noticed a chat. Oh, gotcha. I will do that. No problem. Cool. So a couple of strategies to, my mouse was in the middle of the screen, so now it's in the way. There are a couple of strategies to reduce Datadog costs that we'll go through. One is let's focus on these two, the two highest sources of costs. Flex logs, this one is pretty straightforward to reduce. You can do this entirely within Datadog by changing your configuration a bit. But Cloud SIEM analysis is very challenging to alleviate just in Datadog. And this is where scanner detections really makes a huge difference. You can use scanner to augment your Datadog usage and get amazing coverage and dramatically reduce the cost of Cloud SIEM analysis. But let's start with flex logs. So all you have to do to reduce the cost of flex logs, and these are the logs that have longer retention that are kind of slower to query, but they're still very useful for doing historical investigations. Instead of using Flex Starter, which is easy to adopt, you have to go call sales at Datadog, and you can switch to Flex. So this is kind of interesting. We'll talk about this in a minute with Scanner, but there is this separation of storage and compute, which is what we believe is the future. And it's still a bit more expensive than it should be in Datadog, but it is this is a huge a good way to begin reducing costs is to move from using Flex Starter to using Flex. Instead of 60 cents per million events stored per month, the storage drops down to 5 cents per million per month, and then you have to allocate compute for this. The cost, I think you'll have to chat with Datadog sales to get exactly what the compute will cost. But just if you look at posts online, it seems to be like for the compute size that you'd need at this volume, you might need their extra small or medium size, which might be between like 10 and 60 grand. If you're using small, maybe it's like 40K a year. Anyways, if that is the case, if it really is like 40K for that compute, your cost savings are pretty dramatic. Like you'll reduce your Datadog bill by 100K. So just by adjusting how Flex works and retaining those logs long term in a more efficient way, you can dramatically drive down the costs. The challenge though becomes the speed. If your compute is too small, then querying those logs might take a very long time. We can talk about how Scanner is different there in a minute. But yeah, we do really think that this is like the direction of making historical logs available and faster is good, and this is a good first step to reducing your Datadog costs. So now the next problem, there is no solution just within Datadog to reduce your Cloud SIEM bill. It's very high. It's very expensive at $5 per million events analyzed, and we'll walk through that in a bit of detail. But in our example, 250 gigabytes per day, the annual cost would be over 200 grand a year. And if you're starting to analyze like 500 gigs, a terabyte a day, you're starting to look at 7-figure costs for Cloud SIEM potentially. So the only option you really have to alleviate this pressure is to stop sending log sources to Datadog Cloud SIEM. But then you lose coverage on those detections. And so it just seems like a really terrible experience that happens all the time, where teams and companies, as they scale, instead of logs becoming more useful over time, the value goes down because they have to turn off logs, that they get less coverage over time. It's harder to search them. And we think with a completely different architecture, you can get the coverage that you need. And as logs scale, like you don't have to make these pretty wild trade-offs and start to get less value out of your logs. You'll get more. So the solution in this case is that it is very straightforward to switch from using Datadog Cloud SIEM for these cloud-based cloud operational logs from these different tools and cloud providers, and switch from Datadog Cloud SIEM to scanner detections. And what you'll get as a result is coverage for the core use cases that you had in Datadog Cloud SIEM, and the cost is going to come way down. And we'll talk about how that happens, like why Scanner can be so much less expensive, and it's due to this new architecture. You'll also get 300 plus detection rules that are default. There are more getting added all the time. and it will cover the top sources that you have in Datadog Cloud SIEM. You'll have the ability to write your own custom detections, to queries that filter and aggregate logs, to trigger different alert conditions to get the same sort of alerts that you were getting with Datadog Cloud SIEM. But you'll get even more powerful cross-source correlation, which we'll chat about in a moment. And another really powerful thing about scanner detections is you can use GitHub as a collaboration tool on detections and connect them up to Scanner with detections as code and write unit tests and so on, and sync them as from your GitHub repositories to Scanner when all the tests pass. So there are a couple of really helpful things that Scanner provides in addition to what's available in Datadog Cloud SIEM. But if you're really suffering from the cost of Datadog or doing detection rules, and Scanner can really alleviate that pressure. And let's talk about why Scanner can do this and why it's different. It is completely due to the fact that there is a new system architecture that Scanner uses, and we think that this is the future of how all logging will be done. There are a couple of the other cool examples out there. Amazon seems to be moving in this direction with Amazon Security Lake. They don't do that much internal analysis, but the idea is that security logs should go to the customer's S3 buckets. And application logs should, observability logs should. We think that this is where data needs to go. And so the way that you use Scanner is you load your logs from these different cloud services into your S3 bucket. It's really straightforward in many tools. Many tools have native integrations just to pipe logs to S3. And you can follow our documentation for tools that don't have a direct connection to S3. They're really easy solutions to get those logs into your S3 bucket. And then when the logs arrive in the S3 bucket, then Scanner indexes those logs and organizes them for fast search, runs them through the detection rules, and then organizes them for search inside of an S3 bucket that you own as well. So the beauty of this is that the logs remain in your custody and there isn't vendor lock-in. You could use many different tools on top of these logs and get a lot of value, and Scanner can be one of them. This is where we think things are going. So let's talk about how Scanner drives the cost down with this particular infrastructure. It uses a completely new architecture by focusing on object storage and serverless compute. It maintains an inverted index in object storage. It's not stored in massive clusters that are really expensive to maintain, which is probably why Datadog and Splunk and other tools like that are so expensive. The inverted index is designed to be very flexible and schemaless and is designed for object storage. And then for querying, instead of paying for idle query compute that's running all the time, the compute is serverless. And so, as you can see here, there are a couple of prices here. There's the price for indexing the data, like analyzing the data, reading it from your S3 bucket, goes way down to only 25 cents per gigabyte. And the detections is only 25 cents per gigabyte. And this is what it really should be. You should not have to drop coverage on your logs once you get to 100 or 200 gigabytes of log volume per day. You should get better coverage. You should be able to scale well without needing to disconnect things and not break the bank. That this is where things should go. And so let's go through a concrete example with CloudTrail. So the CloudTrail logs at 250 gigabytes per day, if you load those into S3, it's trivial. It's trivial to get all AWS logs into S3, but it's also trivial to get GitHub logs into S3 and Cloudflare logs into S3, and many of the top log sources from Datadog Cloud SIEM that you need to analyze. They're very easy to get to S3. And instead of spending $440,000 a year on getting coverage for these logs, what it looks like is indexing is less than $2,000 a month. Detections are also less than $2,000 a month, and the total bill is going to be $45,000 a year. It's like because of the optimal way that the system is designed, Scanner can provide much lower cost and allow you to get coverage on log sources that you would otherwise just drop. So, and then let's talk about one of the interesting things that's different about Scanner and other tools like it, and where we think logs are going is that these tools will use your S3 buckets. You'll maintain custody of the data. And so what that means, though, is that you will need to pay for like the request costs and the storage costs in these. And so like a very important question to cover is, we move to this world, what does that look like in terms of AWS costs? And the amazing thing is with object storage, relative to trying to store all of these in an index in a big cluster, is the cost comes way down. So for that 250 gigabytes of log volume per day, that's only going to be $5,700 per year in S3 costs. There are these like S3 puts and get requests and so on to get the logs into an S3 bucket as input. And then there are put and get requests in S3 that you have to pay for the scanner index to be maintained in your S3 bucket. But because of the batching and the compression that's involved with everything that interacts with object storage, the cost is really low. So you can retain 12 months of that CloudTrail data. It's only going to be 13 terabytes compressed, and the total cost is going to be less than $500 a month for that kind of log volume. And this is why a lot of tools allow you to drop things into S3. It's really cheap to get raw data into S3, but then the core thing is there need to be tools like Scanner to go and organize that data and make it searchable and allow you to derive a huge amount of value from the logs that get loaded into S3. Cool. So I'll talk about scanner detections a bit. The way that scanner detections work is that you can write an arbitrary query, and as log data flows into Scanner and it detects new data in your S3 buckets, it will stream that data through the detections and will scan in these rolling time windows. So similar to Datadog Cloud SIEM, where you can specify these sliding windows and look for different thresholds to be exceeded. But you can really write any query you want, not just a count threshold, although that's probably the most common one. Any kind of scanner query is possible to write there, and those queries will execute in a streaming fashion as the data flows in. When a query condition, oh, it looks like we got a question. Yep. Yes, Alex?
So we had one question from someone sent it to me, and you guys can also use the Q&A as well. But they asked, what if we already have a lot of our own custom detection rules in Datadog? Do you have an import mechanism for these?
Yeah, so for the rules that are in Datadog, you can export those as JSON, and then you can use the Scanner CLI tool. We have functionality to migrate Elastic SIEM detections, but also Datadog detections from that JSON format into Scanner detection YAML files. So yes, if you have your own custom rules and you want to get the same kind of coverage that you had in Datadog, the CLI tool that you can use as you're developing detections or running tests, you can use that to migrate all of the Datadog detections that you have to run inside of Scanner as well. Cool, thanks. So yes, when a query condition is triggered, you can send alerts to the kinds of places that you expect, to SOAR tools, to Slack, to Jira, to custom webhooks, et cetera. So basically, you can get the same sort of workflow that you had before. And one of the things that I think is really powerful that you don't get in Datadog Cloud SIEM is more powerful cross-source correlation. So Datadog signal correlation rules allow you to specify up to 2 rules and correlate between them when on common fields like common IP addresses or common usernames or things like that. So if a rule goes off related to one user and another rule goes off and it's the same user involved, you can trigger another alert. That's nice, but with Scanner, because the query rules, you can write any general query that you want to, you can correlate between an infinite number of rules, like an arbitrary number of rules. You can say, like in this particular example, here are these MITRE tactics that I care about. I'm going to group them by the source IP address. And if the source IP address is showing up many times across multiple rules, this can be any number of sources, any number of rules going off. But if these kinds of tactics are happening, then I want to be alerted to this. So if there's data transfer alerts going off, or exfiltration over command and control, exfiltration over web service, etc., you can do these really powerful cross-source correlations, and not just across two rules, but across any number of rules that are going off, any number of log sources that are involved. And so, yeah, I think this is one of the cool things, because Scanner just allows you to run any query and doesn't really limit you. You can do these cross-source correlations, and then this group by count is in order to do correlations, you need these common fields. So normalization is done for OCSF fields, for common OCSF fields like source IP address or user, API, endpoint, host, a bunch of different fields like that. So you can have many different log sources, and you can start to do these aggregations and cross-source correlations over all of those. So it can be very powerful. You can really look everywhere, and you can write detections that will apply to new log sources that you haven't ever seen before. You add it, and then suddenly your detections that use like the general normalized fields will automatically have detection rules applied to them. So lots of cool stuff there. Another thing I think that is super powerful, that our users really care about and spend a lot of time in, is the detections as code feature, where we have integration with GitHub and CI/CD, so that you can define scanner detections as YAML files and collaborate on them inside of your GitHub repository, and run unit tests locally. The unit tests will also be run in Scanner. So whenever a new commit is pushed to your repository, Scanner will detect that change and will pull the new detection rules down and run all of the tests. And you'll be able to see information about which ones, excuse me, which rules succeeded, which rules succeeded and which ones failed. And if all of the tests pass, then the detection rules will be synced and will start to apply to all of your logs as they flow in. Excuse me. So then another really core and important thing about Scanner is, as you are looking to find some a pain point alleviation from Datadog Cloud SIEM, is to make sure that you still get coverage for the same kinds of threats and problems that you had in that you were trying to cover in Datadog. So Scanner provides default detection rules for the top log sources that are in Datadog Cloud SIEM and more. And so because you can also use a Scanner CLI to migrate detection rules from Datadog or from Elastic into Scanner rules, if you're using many SIEMs, you can in a straightforward way translate and get coverage for the same things that you had before. So yes, by moving to Scanner, you get a dramatic cost savings, but with the same sort of coverage that you had before, plus a bunch of these default detection rules that should help with these cloud operational logs. So another useful aspect of Scanner is that you can perform really fast investigations. So if you need to dive into history and need to do an investigation on historical data, oh, I'm sorry. If you need to do investigations on historical data, in Datadog, you need to jump into Flex logs. And if the amount of compute that you have allocated for yourself isn't that high, it could take a very long time to run the query. And so this happens a lot. Like you might be using Athena to go and query historical data on S3. This tends to be a very common workflow as well, if you're not using Datadog Flex logs. And this sort of historical search can be painfully slow in a lot of the existing tools. But the interesting thing about Scanner search is, as the data flows in and flows into your S3 buckets, Scanner organizes this into an inverted index, which is very optimized and compressed and small. So it's roughly 15% of the size of the original uncompressed data. So it's much smaller than like an index and elastic or something like that. But anyways, it's designed for full text search, and you can do really fast needle and haystack search. So if you have like indicators of compromise, you're curious about like IP addresses to go look up, or user activity to go dive into, and you want to look over 6 months or a year of logs, it's very fast. So in the performance here, the example that we often give is if you have multiple hundreds of terabytes of JSON data, in this case, let's say like it's CloudTrail logs, it will take only tens of seconds to run that search. If you do the same thing in a tool like Athena or other kinds of tools, and if you don't have that much compute reserved in Flex logs, it might be much longer than that. It could be minutes, tens of minutes. In Athena's case, it's probably going to take you hours. So if you need to do really fast investigations on this data, Scanner, with the way that the inverted index works and the query compute, you can really dive in and find the needle in the haystack quickly on old data. So the mean time to resolution gets much faster if you have an investigation that you're doing that needs to look at historical logs. So just to summarize, Scanner can be an extremely powerful companion to Datadog. The detections will cover the core use cases of Datadog Cloud SIEM. You can use the Scanner CLI to migrate the detection rules that you already have inside of Datadog, and the cost is going to come way down. And we think that this is an essential element of the future. Like the cost of logs needs to come down by an order of magnitude in order for us all to get the coverage that we need on the massive log volumes that we have. But in addition to that, you will be able to do much more powerful cross-source correlations in Scanner. So instead of signal correlation across up to 2 rules, you can do correlation across an arbitrary number of log sources and rules. And if you are using Scanner for search to do the kinds of investigation on historical data that you might use Datadog Flex logs for, you'll get really fast time to resolution, just much faster investigations on the historical data. So just to show what that looks like for Datadog, what we recommend is something that looks a bit more like this. So you can send your low volume security logs to Datadog. You can send log sources that maybe the application teams or the DevOps teams also need to look at. Maybe it's your own like custom internal logs or application logs. These kinds of things you can continue to send to Datadog. And in order to reduce their cost, you can adjust Datadog Flex logs such that you're using Flex instead of Flex Starter, and you can change the compute settings. Anyways, that's one really nice way to start to save. And then we think, though, for detections for using Datadog Cloud SIEM, it's just the only way that you can reduce cost is to disable logs from going there. And what you can do to dramatically reduce costs is you can take a few of the high volume log sources that you have, like CloudTrail or Cloudflare are very common, but others that are like 100 gigabytes per day or more. And if you send those instead to S3 and you enable Scanner to run detections on those, then you might reduce your bill for those by hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. For that 250 gigabytes per day example we had, you will have a bill that's $400,000 lower than in Datadog. So this is really what's needed for these high volume logs, and it shouldn't be the case that you lose coverage on these as your log volumes grow. Let's talk about a couple of different results that we've seen from our customers. So we have actually a number of fintech companies who are using Scanner. It's really fun. But again, like as you're using Datadog and you're growing quickly, these costs can really sneak up on you. And suddenly your log volume has doubled or tripled. You're adding more AWS accounts. You're adding like your server count is growing. There can be, or you're adding more tools that you're using internally. The logs get really huge. And so for this particular fintech company, the expected cost reduction per year, they're looking at $500,000. So what they needed was the same kind of coverage that they were getting from Datadog Cloud SIEM and more powerful collaboration via GitHub and so on. And so this is what they with Scanner, they were able to dramatically reduce their cost and get their core use cases satisfied, but then even more powerful cross-source correlations by switching to Scanner. And then another one of our customers is a company that builds really cool developer tools, and their savings are looking like 6 figures per year. One of the interesting things for them is that the number of queries they can do for an investigation to really get down to the bottom of an investigation looking at historical data is just exploded. So for a given investigation, because other tools are really slow to query through historical data, it would take them 5 to 10 times longer to finish that investigation. It might actually take them like 1 or 2 weeks to fully run all the queries that they want to get to the bottom of something. But with Scanner, because it was so much faster, they can wrap all of that up in a day and run instead of 10, 20 queries a day. It became like 100, 200 queries a day on their historical data. So the resolution, the mean time to resolution just got much, much faster. And so just in summary, the kinds of things that you can expect to see by moving high volume log sources away from Datadog Cloud SIEM to Scanner is much more powerful correlations, the coverage you need on the use cases that you have for the cloud, those cloud operational logs, and huge cost savings relative to Datadog. And just to close up here, I'll share a little bit about what we think the future of security logs looks like. The traditional log management is just not going to work. The costs need to come way down. We start to see a lot of different folks moving data to data lakes and to data warehouses that are object storage based, but those can be very painful to use and very slow. So anyone who's playing around with Athena to go and answer questions or run detections and so on will tell you that that gets really painful. But we do think that this is all going to get better over time. We think all data is on its way to object storage. That is the place where that's the one storage destination that can handle the scale that is needed for hundreds of gigabytes per day, for terabytes per day. And we think that the trend is that the effort required to onboard new data will continue to drop. Vendors will make it easier and easier to get to S3. Many vendors of security log data already have native tools to export to S3. But instead of requiring you, once it gets over to S3, to do a bunch of ETL work, the tools are going to get smarter and are going to be able to handle the data in its raw format and give you value. So that's at Scanner, whatever the structure is and whatever the schema is of the data, Scanner will pull it in and handle raw JSON and CSV and plain text and Parquet files. The ETL work is going to go down and the tools are going to get smarter. And log volume costs, instead of spiking and being dollars per gigabyte and dollars per million log events, there'll be tens of cents per gigabyte and tens of cents for millions of log events. The cost will continue to drop. And then the other core thing that is slow to happen, but we want to accelerate with Scanner, is that the analysis speed of the tools that are querying the data in object storage in S3 buckets, the analysis speed is going to go up and the quality is going to go up. So you'll be able to, with a lot less effort, get huge amounts of data of many different schemas into S3 buckets, keep it for much longer, costs will go down, and you'll get much faster tools and a much higher quality analysis of that data. And so this is what we really care about. We want Scanner to make it trivial to get log data indexed and searchable, extremely fast to run queries, and extremely good at providing insights and detections on the security data that you have. So if you want to play with Scanner, we'd love to show it to you. If you go to scanner.dev/demo, you can jump in sign up for a playground environment, and we'll launch an environment for you where you can try out search and detections, and you can jump into the playground guide at docs.scanner.dev and see how you can use Scanner to run an investigation and create detections, and play with Scanner at scale, and see how fast it is on this cloud operational data that we're talking about. But anyways, thank you so much for your time, and happy to answer any final questions.
We've got a couple in the Q&A, and I've got some in my chat, but I think you answered this one. Maybe you can speak to it again. But how much faster is Scanner versus Datadog Flex Logs?
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends on the compute size that you have. If you have hundreds of terabytes of log data, you're probably going to want to use like a large size compute. This is something that, because Flex Logs is very new, that there isn't a lot of performance data out there. But for the same cost, Scanner will be able to query those like hundreds of terabytes. Like each 100 terabytes to go and search will probably take 10 seconds. And depending on the size of Flex Logs, you might be able to get that kind of search speed at the very highest sizes. But if you're using like extra small or small size compute, that might take minutes or maybe tens of minutes. Probably faster than Athena, which might take hours to run. But Scanner, one of the beautiful things is you don't pay for any query compute until you issue a query, and then you'll get mega awesome compute for that query and get answers rapidly. So it's as though you have large all the time. But that's a good question. There isn't a ton of benchmarking data out there, but from what we've heard and played with, yeah, it can be minutes to run queries in Flex Logs if you're using small compute sizes, and only like 10 seconds, a few seconds to run those same queries in Scanner.
This one's kind of in the similar vein, but do you expect Datadog to improve their performance on Flex Logs? What limits them in improving this and making it faster, cheaper for their customers?
Yeah, I think the one thing that's interesting is for a lot of companies that are building tools to go and execute queries against data stored in object storage, the model is to run a cluster that's available at all times, or you can spin up a cluster and spin it back down. So like Snowflake is this way, where if you want queries to be fast, you have to spin up a very big cluster and then pay for it while it's running. The way that we look at it is that Scanner, you shouldn't use any compute unless you're running a query, and then we spin up serverless functions to go give you a lot of compute rapidly, and then once your query is done, it all spins back down again, so the usage is low. So for Datadog, they can make the performance really high by requiring you to run a lot of flex compute, but Scanner does not. So it'll be interesting. Like if they could get to a point where they do the same thing, where they spin up serverless functions to go and analyze this data and then spin it back down again. But they should make it faster. The speed that you should get out of object storage, it shouldn't be minutes or hours to run queries. It should be tens of seconds or less. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But if it is the case that Datadog is using a model where it's not serverless compute, but is like stateful compute that's running all the time, could be quite expensive to keep enough compute around to pay for fast querying. And we think that they and other people should try the same model that we use, which is to spin up serverless compute on demand and then spin it back down again, so that you're not paying for a lot of idle query compute.
Nice. We've got two more. How do I get started with one or two log sources today? How long does it take? What does the migration and backfill process look like from Datadog? Yeah,
so for the top log sources that you see in the cloud operational logs, like AWS or GCP, GitHub, Cloudflare, et cetera, it's really easy to get those into S3. So like what we typically see for people who try out Scanner on their own logs is they'll get started with some AWS logs, which are trivial to get into S3, like CloudTrail is like you click a button and it's in S3. And then they'll also do Cloudflare, which is also really easy to get into S3, and then GitHub. So it really is like a few minutes to get the logs into S3, flowing into S3 unless it's already there. And then what you do with Scanner is you can run Terraform or CloudFormation and sit with us if you want to for like 15 minutes to run those and create the appropriate IAM permissions for Scanner to be able to analyze the logs in S3. But yes, so like it's a very fast process. You can do it on your own as well. You don't need to sit with us to run the appropriate infrastructure as code tools to set up the resources that you need to give Scanner access to your buckets. But yeah, so the process is very fast. Like people tend to do a trial for a couple of weeks on their log sources, and then Scanner will backfill terabytes of data. If you want to do even more than that, you're totally welcome to. We can chat about details, but Scanner will backfill a couple of months or like 6 months or even a year, depending on what you want to test for in the trial. So we've had pilots do hundreds of terabytes going into the past so that they could actually check the historical search on their data. So once you get things connected, Scanner will kick off a backfill job and will index that data going back in the past at speeds of 50 terabytes a day. 80 terabytes a day is like the fastest that we've done before S3 throttled us. But if your bucket is warm and S3 isn't throttling it, you could probably exceed that speed. So if you had a ton of data to backfill, it could probably be done like a day. But anyways, yeah. So if you want to try it out, we can work with you on spinning up the appropriate log sources and doing backfill so that you can play with it on historical logs.
We got time for one more. Are there any customers that you have successfully migrated off of Datadog SIEM or that use it as a companion that we can reference?
Yeah, for sure. So I think a couple of really great ones. I think like Lemonade would probably be a great example that we can chat. That would be happy to chat with folks. There are a couple more that we could probably share. We'll chat with them first. But their approach was with Datadog and Splunk. They had it both of those tools. And because of growing pains and so on with those and the cost, they're looking for solutions. They started with a few log sources in Scanner, and then were able to get the level of functionality that they needed and the use cases covered that they needed for all of these logs. And so, yeah, they've moved off all log data for all the application teams and so on off of Datadog. But for the security use cases, yes, like the Cloud SIEM is that is something that it isn't necessary to use anymore because of what Scanner provides for them at a much lower cost. So, but if you'd like to chat more, I would be happy to talk with other customers and see if you'd like to do a reference call. Cool.
That's
Any
all I
other
have on my
questions?
side.
Sweet. Well, thanks everybody. Happy logging. Hope everyone can avoid spending $1 million a year on logs. And see you around. Take care.